The reason for the Disabled People's Organisation's COVID-19 Emergency Fund was the recognition that disabled people were clearly one of the most excluded groups in terms of how the pandemic was impacting on them, and people were very isolated, didn't have access to support or services.
Originally, the National Emergency Trust were going to release this funding to go to a charity to support disabled people. However, a collaboration of organisations came together and brought a new proposal where we would split the money between grassroots disabled people's organisations who will struggle due to COVID as they rely on short-term grants, but also their members who are struggling with independence, income loss, independent living due to COVID.
The priorities were about supporting independent living, tackling isolation, and also addressing income issues. We all knew as the partners, as the Four Nation Partnership, from engagement we'd done with our own members, that those were the key issues.
The barriers and challenges that our members faced were there were so many different ones. It was down to the individual and how that individual's life had been affected by the pandemic. We found individuals who were highly social were quite affected by the fact that they needed to stay at home. They couldn't socialise in their normal way. They couldn't come to the groups, they couldn't go out on buses and do the things that they normally did, and these things were very, very important for them in their life.
The issues that we faced were, we went on to Zoom, but at first not everybody could do that. They didn't all have the tech, they didn't all have the IT connections. Those that had the tech didn't necessarily know how to use it.
The barriers for our members were engaging online. Not everybody had a smartphone or laptop or device. Barriers for people in getting out to the shops. Public transport, of course, which is always an issue, but then it became impossible to use. Wearing masks was problematic for quite a few people. It was a time when we just had to completely take stock.
Many disabled people were not getting access to social care support because of fears around COVID and having PAs come into your house. That was a major issue. Also things like accessing shopping, not having skills around IT because suddenly everything was online, but many people didn't have the equipment or didn't have the skills. People were struggling financially.
There were some organisations that were focusing completely on isolation by having online peer support groups, but also at the same time they were tackling digital inclusion and independent living as they were helping their members to essentially be brought online so they could connect with the world virtually instead of having to rely on face-to-face, which was greatly reduced.
For the members that didn't have the tech, we needed the iPads and the data SIMs that we had from the grant so that we could get people connected. One
of the things that we found was really important was that people could see a friendly face on a daily basis, and we were getting this a lot in feedback via text, on the phone. People were feeling lonely and disconnected from their regular communities, be that where they were living or if it was, say, the PPF community. And so that was one of the nicest ways for us, was to be able to break down that barrier, was to have some fun activities where people would see friendly faces every day, and so we were still keeping connected.
I think it's been a huge success. We've been able to support the work of grassroots DPOs. I think it's brought them to the attention of funders like NET, like Welsh Government, and we hope others. It's given them a profile in their local community.
The project in itself was very successful. As with all things, I think we would make some slight changes if it was done again. And on that, I'm thinking especially those stages at the beginning where it's very difficult to get a lot of information out very quickly. So making those connections really quickly to make sure things come out in translated version so it's accessible to everyone is vitally important. But in terms of how the individual projects went, again, I think it was a roaring success.
I think it's really put DPOs on the map in Wales, and I think that's really vital for the future in terms of, again, back to nothing about us without us. You know, if we've got a strong and thriving network of DPOs in Wales, then that makes it more likely that services and policies around disabled people will be much more, which will actually achieve, the rights of disabled people.